All right. So welcome to the fourth meeting of our Blue Ocean Shift discussion group. And today we're going to be discussing part 2, step 4, find out and how you get there. I believe it's chapters 10 and 11 in the book. And this meeting is going to be run by the lovely Melanie Brewer. So Melanie, please feel free to take it away. I'm sharing my screen and all the questions are up as well in the Google Doc.
Yeah, I'm hoping to refer to some figures, so hopefully you can scroll through to the figures when we need those.
Absolutely.
So I'm thinking we should aim for 75 minutes to 90 minutes overall. And I'll tell you what my hypothesis is for how we could structure this, and you can tell me if you do or do not want to do all these things. But I think it'd be nice to revisit where we are now in the total flow of the whole book. And I've been finding myself referring back to the previous steps, thinking, well, why did they do that? How's that setting us up for what we're doing now? And then recap last time, maybe for people that weren't here for that one briefly, and then go through the questions. And I think it might be nice to do the exercise for non-customers, or sort of at least touch on non-customers, because we didn't have time to cover that last time. We did the buyer utility map, but not the 3 tiers of non-customers. And then it didn't seem like the step 4 lent itself too well to exercises. So maybe the non-customers is a good choice. So that's my idea. Does that sound good to everybody for what we might do? I see David.
Yeah, that sounds cool.
Yeah. All right, so then can we look at the figure that has all the steps of the process, way back from the beginning of the book? So we're at step 4 of the 5-step process.
So you want the first page of it?
Yeah, the one that has all the boxes and arrows. So,
okay.
So in step 1, we talked about getting started and scoping the initiative with the pioneer, migrator, and settler map.
Well,
and it seems like that a lot of the first 3 steps are about motivating the team. So then in the second step, we went to the strategy canvas, the as-is strategy canvas, and looking at where your industry or offering is today. And then step 3, which was last time, seemed to be a lot about continuing to motivate the initiative, because there's a lot of work in step 4. And also relying on the intuition of the team to discover where there are pain points in the existing offering or in the journey of using the existing offering. So that's kind of where we are in the whole giant process. And last time we focused a lot on the buyer utility map, and we talked about the value proposition and the need to let that evolve over the process of the Blue Ocean initiative. And then we did an example buyer utility map where we took the example of a smartphone, and we went through the process of, the steps you might take before buying it, the steps that you might take in the store or online as you buy it, and so on and so forth, to try to find where pain points were in that process. So now we're going to turn to step 4, which is where the team goes out and does research. And I guess one point about the questions as we go into those is that the format should be that everybody states their question and kicks off the discussion, and we should cut it at about 5 minutes discussion per question. So maybe everyone can help keep track of timing. So should we go into the questions then?
Okay.
Thank you, Melanie.
Sure.
Let's make it happen.
Yes.
All right, I have them up right here.
I have a sneaky feeling I'm first up.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. So I guess I've got a couple of questions, but hopefully they won't be too long, and we might be able to cover both in 5 minutes maybe. But so the path that kind of got most of my attention, I think, I guess in line with what you were saying earlier, Melanie, in terms of going back earlier in the book to see what the current step had been informed by previous work, is that before they even mentioned the buyer utility map, path 4 was screaming out buyer utility map to me. So it's quite interesting. I found they dedicated a whole sort of big chunk of the book to the buyer utility map and looking at the non-customers. But that was in itself integrated, maybe in a slightly different fashion, within the 6-pass framework. So it's just curious that they weighted that one so heavily, and I was just curious as to why they've done that. So I don't know if that's a decent question or hasn't much. It might be more rhetorical than anything because they're not able to answer us. But I was just wondering if you guys had any thoughts on the fact that there was so much emphasis on the bioutility map, i.e. Part 4 stuff compared to the other things. If you don't, doesn't matter, I'll skip to the next question.
Anybody want to take that one on?
I mean, go ahead, David.
It's a really good question. I agree with it. I'd like to keep that in the back of our minds as we move forward. We don't need to spend 5 minutes on that per se. It's a difficult question. So we might answer it gradually during the hour. That's what I'm suggesting. Maybe if you don't mind, we can skip forward.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Yeah,
and if I could add 2 things to that though, just so he knows. Like I've been tracking what is new in this book and what is rehashing Blue Ocean strategy, and buyer utility map is rehashing Blue Ocean strategy, and they are beefing it up and adding more context to it. But it is one of their tools, and I think that it seems to me they're trying to make this first book, which is a case studies, more prescriptive, and so we're seeing all of this sort of what's the purpose of this particular activity. I found it useful for us to do together, and for me from the standpoint of obviously building consensus with teams, but I like as a strategist to do a competitive strategy first before going out and talking to users, just to familiarize with the market space. And so I did like where it was, and then how all of a sudden they started talking about, now it's time to get out of the building.
Yeah, that was my thought too, because I saw Pete's question last night when I went in to look at the document, and I was sort of scratching my head going, well, wait, why is that? I hadn't really noticed that. And I was thinking the same thing, that maybe in chapter 3 or step 3, it was about the team's intuition and, kind of showing themselves that there are pain points and exciting them to go talk to people to really do that hard work to get at the real answers based on, users and data. So it's like 2 versions of it. One version is the team saying this, based on our zeitgeist, this is how we feel about it based on what we imagine the experience is of buying an iPhone or whatever. And then in the next step, it's the real deal. Let's go talk to people buying phones and watch them buying phones and discover things we couldn't think of.
Sorry, do you want to take it?
Take it, Vinay.
Okay, just my comment regarding Pete's question and that part 4. I think it's then buyer utility map is a little bit more when you want to innovate within the same domain where you are. But here is much like, I don't know if you have heard about intersectional innovation, when you are trying to combine 2 completely different domains and find intersections. So for me, maybe part 4 is much more like that maybe you don't want to innovate just within the domain, but try to take a look at other completely different domains and trying to combine with your domains and your industry. It may be a little bit of philosophical explanation, but maybe it's something that it's my interpretation. What is the difference between buyer utility map and part 4?
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I think the point of it is valid, that it's being used. The earlier use of it is to sort of create that hypothesis, which you can then go and test with users or customers or whatever. And like I say, you're looking for different types of buyers, not necessarily the ones you initially considered, maybe in the earlier stage. But I guess it kind of leads on to my next question, which was looking at the involvement of the research effort, because I think we've all been thinking along the way that research is a really important part of this process and something that's worth doing. And the authors, go lengths to say you need to get out and do this stuff, which is great. But I think, as David mentioned, I think we mentioned one of the subsequent points that research is not, doing good research is not an easy thing to do. So you either have to, I guess, build in a bit of contingency whilst you're still learning the ropes of it, and maybe discount later if you think actually we just asked a really dumb question, or now we know it's done, we'll forget the answer. But but I was just wondering if there was, scope for maybe getting some, professional research help, whether it's in the organisation and they're a permanent part of the team and can just guide the other sub-teams on how to do good research, or whether they go out with, into the field with stakeholders and maybe like show Malgrid once and then let the guys take over, I don't know. So it just seemed like this was such an important part of like we're now starting to get closer to solutions. If you don't do a good job of the research, then the potential what's coming next.
This relates to question 8, where I said the same thing in a different way. So I agree with the question. There's a problem here, but I don't have the answer.
Yeah, I can't remember if I mentioned this in the last meeting, but I feel like there was a quote I was going to tweet, but it was basically like how they're all of a sudden at this point evangelizing, like, we need to not just take the teams and the stakeholders out and have them experience the product firsthand, and I was thinking, really? Like, I mean, one part of me is like, companies aren't doing this anyway. I mentioned this last week, we're living in a bubble. But again, it's sure, I can accept that a lot of companies don't do it, but it's ridiculous to me at this point in time that if a company wants to be innovative, especially now more than ever, right? Let's say that in the 80s or the 60s, where companies can basically come out of nowhere, especially with software, and wipe out your business model, and that this idea that you could just sort of rest on your laurels seems really naive. And I would hope that more companies know they need to talk to their customers, and that user research needs to be built into their process.
But it would seem to be challenging for people to do it because they were recommending 10 to 12 or maybe up to 15 interviews for each of the paths. And that's a really hefty request for somebody that may not be comfortable doing that or may not have done it before.
Yep.
Yes, and I would say lack of time. It's not only maybe companies would like to do that, but it's all the time, oh, we are so busy, so many things to do. Or maybe we know our customers, that it's a little bit mindsets and approach.
All right, should we go to question 3, which is David's question?
The get out of the building. It seems like it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we hit it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Just to add to this previous discussion, I wonder if this may be just applying to larger organizations with the capacity and the already established resources to go that far and cover this mileage of doing this deep research. It always feels like smaller organizations that are in a way in the trenches of survival are only able to do so much. I'm not expecting an answer. I'm just bringing this up where this level of depth is very challenging.
Right. I agree. The book is written for enterprises, big, Fortune 500 companies, not startups.
And I guess that problem only becomes worse, if you're needing to get sort of senior stakeholder buy-in. Because I can imagine if you have like a Blue Ocean team that's kind of sitting, mid-table in the company, if they've got to go and ask for, a lot of time and money to put aside for this research, or they go and do it and then take the findings back to whoever's got to sign off the final check or whatever, and they say, do you know what, no, I don't think it's that, my opinion is this instead, and it just, so ideally you want to get a senior decision maker out of the building with you, but I can imagine in certainly large companies that would be a real big challenge too. So, but I guess I don't think you're sort of shy away from saying this is not an easy thing to do, but they just say if you want to do it properly, this is what you need.
So Melanie, let's move to your question number 4. And we can come back to the questions 1, 2, and 3 later when they pop up again at the end of the series.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I liked paths 1 through 5. I know there were some later questions where people were, questioning the paths, but path 6 seemed almost like tacked on a little bit at the end and not as well thought out, and certainly not as methodical. Like I felt like the other paths really were like a systemized way to get insights, just laid out very clearly. So in path 6, I know clearly it's important, but it also isn't really relying on primary research, as far as I can tell. They even specifically mentioned letting people do secondary research for path 6, which is about identifying trends and so-called shaping the trends. And I wondered what that means. What does it mean to shape a trend rather than react to it? And is there a way to get insight into trends more directly from users? And I really was having trouble thinking about ways to do that. So I hope somebody else here has an answer.
I know personally when I was reading Path 6, to me it sounded like, see if you can guess the future. If it works well, great. If not, then whoops. So yeah, I mean, a great example right now is for better or for worse, I'm getting really involved in cryptocurrency and the idea of blockchain being an industry changer, like this new technology that can change the way we do banking or anything like that. So that's potentially a trend. And some companies are hopping on board and some aren't, and some are calling it a bubble and some aren't. So when I read this, it sounded to me like, do your best to try to guess what's going to happen in the future and capitalize on it, but how do you really do that systematically? So I guess I kind of agree. I didn't know what the concrete basis of this was, whereas the other stats had concrete things you could take action on.
Right. Maybe it is just a fact that that's a hard thing to get a handle on. Oh, what's that?
You can send me, it's a request. Yeah, send me here. Send your donations here.
What is it? Litecoin, Bitcoin?
That's Bitcoin.
That's Bitcoin, okay.
The fees will be too high. You can PayPal a friend instead of sending Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I mean, cryptocurrency is a really great example of a trend, clearly, at this moment, that people are trying to figure out how to harness. So, I mean, if we wanted to learn about cryptocurrency as a trend, like what kinds of things might we do? Is that another way to think about this?
Well, I think Path 6 is more for people who have a good sense of marketing to start with, and it's how to cobble together a bunch of buzzwords in a way that does make sense without necessarily having much depth. And then they take it, they create something new, which is, for a time, it's trendy. And if they can do that several times in a row, they are the trend setter in a small way, micro changes. Like when Jamie came out with a book and master classes and all that in her field, Jamie was doing things that others had not done specifically that way. And she innovated several times in series. Right, Jamie?
Right.
Can I?
The online master classes?
Yeah, but before that you already had a trend going. But maybe it was just my bubble of being aware of it.
Or the workshops? Yeah.
I guess one thing that might sort of help protect you against sort of emerging trends is point 4 here, I think, which is, are the trends are evolving along a clear trajectory? And if there's a lot of potential ways in which that trend could move, then I guess you can almost park it and say we're not going to design with that in mind, de-scope it. But maybe it's still worth keeping it in mind to see how it does progress, to see if it then does become more relevant for you, or does stabilise and it does become a more established thing. Because oh, sorry, go ahead.
How do you point out the trends to begin with? It's a very whimsical thing, and there is no real way to do research to Google what are the recent trends in, and in a way it sounds more like it's based on your ability to absorb and process and then share it with other people who hopefully do the same to try and come up with what would be the idea for relevant trends that can affect your process. When I looked into it, I had the same question myself of there's no real structured way to find this, just because it's like fashion. You can look for fashion, but the reality is that you need to observe it and process it internally.
Yeah, then you missed it. I don't know, like I feel like I'm always like trying to spot trends in tech, and like right now I'm all obsessed with augmented reality and looking at the sectors that really could benefit the most from that technology. And of course I'm reading articles that are written already in Harvard Business Review that of stuff that's gone on for the last year. And so have I missed that trend? Like how do you spot that before, I guess going to tiny little meetup groups where people are just discussing it when it's in its infancy, to know how to bring it into your own work environment, your enterprise, and potentially leverage it for future projects or redoing existing products, whatever.
I suppose maybe one way of getting around that is, and I don't know how easy this is to do, and it might be too hard, is to find a reliable source of trends data. I mean, in one of my previous jobs, we had a subscription to Stylus, and they were always chucking out trends information. But I never got to the bottom of whether they actually verified their own trends and predictions.
What is Stylus?
Yeah, Stylus. They're like a kind of a research agency. They do research into all sorts of stuff. If you pay a subscription, it's not cheap, but it's but if you work for an enterprise, for example, this is the sort of thing that you might want to invest in. But yes, they produce training documents over the year, over what's going on now in all sorts of different sectors. But yeah, I never had the time to look in to see whether they were actually accurate or not. So that might, rather than have to do all the donkey work yourself and doing a literature review, you could maybe sort of bypass it quickly, go and check, go and look at some sort of trend websites, see what they were predicting, over the course of a few years, and then see if they kind of those properties got fulfilled. And if you can validate a good source of information, then just use that, maybe.
That's a good reference, thanks. Okay, actually David saying time is up for this segment. I agree, we need to move on.
So Leo's up next with 2 questions.
All right. The first one was involving the case study for, I think it was step 1? What did I write?
Oh, path 2.
Path 2, yeah. So the case study about health media and how they essentially blue ocean the experience of getting to someone faster, talking to someone faster. But in the case study, they seem like, again, I know it's a business book and it goes against everything like UX. So it talked about how they succeeded by having another medical giant like Johnson & Johnson buy them out for an absurd amount of money. And that was their successful blue ocean story. But I thought that there was so much more they could have written about how this actually improved the users' lives. I think that should have been a real metric for the blue ocean. Did it really make the user, did it make people healthier? Did it make their lives easier? Were they actually able to get access? Like those kind of metrics, they didn't go to any of them. It was just about, just about the money. So, and maybe I'm getting too mixed up between reading a business book that's mainly focused on revenue and a UX book, but it's more of a thought than a question. I was curious if anyone has any thoughts on that.
I think the point's well taken, and they emphasize throughout the book that you're supposed to be looking at things from the buyer's point of view, so the metrics could certainly skew that way too.
Yeah. And then, yeah, that's a good thought. But at the Path 5, this is the one that I found a bit interesting. So the Path 5, the idea of, this is one that playing the human emotions, right? So make something to where people can actually get attached to it emotionally. And they call this a separate path, but I mean, I'd like to see something like this be at the core of it and then have all the other paths built into it, because anymore, and my example is, why would someone buy an Apple laptop versus a Windows laptop with the same thing? It's because people are paying for the experience, right? Apple sells experiences, Starbucks sells experiences, and it sells experiences that resonate with us emotionally. So, I mean, at the core, Path 5 should be right in the middle and everything builds on it. again, another thought. Tell me I don't have any questions. I just have thoughts I write down.
But I viewed that one in a different way, and I don't know if I misread it, but I was seeing that as a way to look at something that you might view as like a high touch, high emotional product, and then see if maybe there's a way to make it super functional, or vice versa. Like, you know, maybe a visit to the doctor's office tends to be very functional, we expect it to be very clinical and whatever. How could we make that emotional? Like, as a source of opportunity to flip the associations people have between emotional and functional. Did anybody else get that when they were reading it?
Yeah, I had the same read as well. I guess I suppose the key would also be to sort of factor in your brand as well as you do that. Because if you're particularly, say, playful brand, building something that's uber functional, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to look functional and boring. It can just work better, but still look engaging and funky and all the other things your brand wants. That's what branding's about. But I guess it's more about designing the kind of the core of the experience, and then I guess branding can be a wraparound. So yeah, I think you're right, Melanie.
Although, I mean, I guess it raises a question like that Leo raised, is like, is something that's just dead straight functional, is that really likely to please users ever?
I know from things I've worked on though in the past that some people like just bog standard functionality. If it's not, if you're filling out your tax returns or something, or applying for a driver's license, that's just a life thing or an admin thing you've got to deal with, and you want to get it done quickly, and you don't need queries with it necessarily. I guess you could chuck a few little delighters in there along the way, but I'm not expecting like no emotional roller coaster when I'm sort of filling in some paperwork,
Right.
Can we trim emotional down to what in UX we call delight, and also relates to research that finds that beautiful UI is perceived as easier for some users, and if you can win both, even this can become a little bit happier to an extent, and there's plenty of examples how things are reduced to a childlike going through steps. I don't know if tax returns is too complex to find a way to do it this way, but there's a way to make almost everything look like a game, almost. It just takes a lot of work. And emotional here wouldn't necessarily be about how much it relates to your sense of self, like fashion does, or following brands, but at the very least on the experience level. I'm definitely taking this back to UX, but it might help.
That's a great point.
It is interesting to hear the different backgrounds talk about how they perceive it, but that's what makes it fun. I want to say one quick thing about the tax thing. While I do agree that tax is the thing you have to get done, and it's just, you gotta do it, TurboTax made it splendid. TurboTax made it, they really did. They took something really complex, they broke it down in pieces. They made a great UX out of it, and then by the end of it, what I would think was, I remember the first time doing it, what I thought was daunting and horrible, but it taught me how to do it along the way. So to me, that's an example of great UX, taking something that is completely non-understandable for someone like me, and then helping me so by the end of it, I actually feel like I understood it. Did I understand it? Probably not, but I felt like I did.
And it's funny, I think you almost have an emotional connection to your taxes. You're about it. So we got the emotion and the function.
Yeah, and then the emotion of feeling like I probably didn't get as big a break as I could because I messed up, but that's fine.
Sorry, Mina, I think we cut you off. Was that Mina?
Yes, it was me, but it was okay. I just wanted to say I had another perspective that's emotional. I'm thinking maybe it's also like if you can relate your offerings to something that is good for higher meanings, like that can contribute solving climate change problem or something, so that you can invoke emotion that someone who hasn't used your products wants to use, because all of a sudden you are offering something that also can improve some world problems. You understand what I mean? Mm-hmm. So maybe that you see, I don't know, I'm producing these type of things that they're very functional, but if I add some extra offering, so it will contribute that the user feels now it's ecological, or I'm not I'm contributing to that climate change problem or something, then you will get some new customers. So because you will, but it also related to that non-customers, how you can get a new group of non-customers to start using your offerings through that emotional experience that they feel, oh, all of a sudden I'm doing something good to the mankind.
It almost sounds like this path works better when you take something functional and bring the emotional in rather than vice versa from the examples we're talking about.
Yeah.
Maybe we should move to the next question, or a series of questions, which are David.
Okay, my first question ties into the conversation we're already having. To me, paths 5 and 6 are very similar, and let's say I take what Eyal said a minute ago. If you can move to the emotional, which is like semantic and deep personal, you can add some delight, you've now created a strong basis to find new twists, and the little twists can create a trend. That's the way I was reading it, because steps 1 to 4 to me were very mechanistic. There's a lot of work to do. This could go on forever. It could take a lot of researchers. Then steps 5 and 6 require a different kind of skill, a different type of thinking. So I'm just saying that's my view. It's not really a big question, but it relates to the next questions. Should we move? Anybody? I've said enough. I should stop here before we move to question 8.
Keep going.
Keep going. Okay. So question 8 is more of a critique. Chapter 10 uses the word systematically in the chapter title. And the 6 paths are definitely good to start with. I wrote here, it's a beginning. It's not, to me, it's not a system. So I'm wondering if we can make it more systematic. And what I mean by that is something that's relatively fast, that can be implemented by many different people of different skill level and interest level, because the book is talking about bringing people together and making sure nobody steps out of the process just to receive the distillation or the summary. So I'm a little bit confused or frustrated. I don't see how this is a system, because there's so much work. I think Pete mentioned it earlier. There's a lot of work to do by specialists in all of these paths. Am I asking a good question here?
Well, I actually thought that too. You brought up the point that I was thinking. The entire time up till this 6 paths part, they talk about how everyone should see everything, so there's more buy-in, there's more understanding. But then this one I'm talking about, oh, there's so much to do, so split it up into teams of 2. They say teams of 2, but they essentially say split it up, do your own thing, come back, and then report to each other. And I thought that kind of goes against what the idea of having the entire group see everything, so they have the bigger picture and getting group buy-in, because now they aren't there to experience it in a real world as they're doing it. So I was also a bit confused by this and thought this could have been put together a bit more to be more consistent with previous messages in the book.
It seemed to me like it was about splitting into 2 groups. Each group covers only 3 of the steps.
Right.
So it also points out that they're not sequential. I mean, one group will have to jump straight into 4, 5, 6 without any kind of knowledge about what 1, 2, and 3 would be until the groups report to each other.
I mean, they mentioned the importance of storytelling, which is not the same as doing it yourself, but it's a good point that reporting back should involve not dry bullet points, but vivid stories, hopefully that bring some of those firsthand experiences to life. Doesn't solve it, but they do mention it.
But I guess maybe it's a compromise between sort of faulting immersion and just timescales, because this potentially could take quite a long time. More time than some organisations could be able to handle. So you know, I guess maybe they're just trying to accommodate that to a certain extent. And maybe there's other way around that you can build into the process, sort of like weekly catch-ups or stand-ups or however you want to work. You know, maybe there's existing processes you can use to help, you know, maintain that communication flow.
So you remember last week the buyer utility map was 36 boxes. There were 6 rows and 6 columns. Now here we have 6 paths. I'm thinking a system could be to create 6 questions or queries or steps to do or work to do. So then you can divide people up into teams and they follow 1 or 2 paths and do the 6 steps. And they would also have 36 boxes to fill in. And it could be later critiqued or corrected by real specialists. But at least then you would be dividing yourselves into functional tasks that works separately for a while and then come back together to share the results. And I do think that's much better than forcing everyone to see everything at all times. That's what happened in the Barra utility map, if my memory is correct about that stage. And I think it's more valid than to, so in a future version of the book, they might want to correct this business of getting top level people to see everything. There's something incorrect or inaccurate or over optimistic about that statement, which has caused me to mention this confusion.
I think this could be an interesting format for like a one-day workshop that a bunch of teams do, because it's very fast. People get together, do their own thing, and come back. And even if, you know, it's all confusing, you've only burnt a day or 2 on it instead of months and months. So I think it'd be good for a one-day workshop to get idea generation, just to get everything out there and then narrow down what's important. But as far as like a long-term plan with, like you said, the higher ups, it's very lofty, and I think that'd be hard to do. Yeah.
Okay, next question. If we move away from the 6 paths, we now have 4 actions in the chapter number 11, developing alternative opportunities. And at some point, I remember reading something that I could not find in the last 24 hours when I was looking for it. So here's my question. They said to eliminate or delete and to create might create the highest rewards or the highest gains. But if you only focus on reducing what you're doing or raising the bar, you're only improving things by a degree. It could be a large or small degree, but it's not a 10x or 100x or 1000x. It's not a huge change. But a game changer would be to eliminate something or create something. But does anybody else remember reading that? I could not find it when I went back to look for it.
When I read that, I thought that they were referring to like the traditional way in the business world of thinking about creating value, which admittedly, I'm not an expert in that, but I thought that they were saying that traditionally, this is how people think about it. We either reduce things to bring the cost down, or we raise things and the cost goes up, which keeps you on that standard curve, which is way back at the beginning of the book. But to like push into an entirely new area of value, you've got to do the other steps, because the reducing and raising kind of work together and just keep you moving along that same curve that the whole industry is competing on. That was my take on it.
Yes, and my comment on this is also related. I don't know if you saw that Circus du Soleil, their blue ocean strategy value curve. I think with then creating something new, you introduce something new, and that way you open a new set of non-customers. So it's not only like, I agree with that, Melanie, as you said, like both to reduce cost and to do that differentiation, but also I think with creating something new, you introduce some maybe new domain or something new in your existing solution, and then you open a new ocean of former non-customers that become customers.
Yeah,
I think it's also related to that settler, migrator, pioneer map. Then you see like, oh, now we have a lot of products, and then you relate which of them are, although they're settlers, maybe they're creating big revenue, we are not going to reduce them or eliminate. But if we have some settlers that are not creating a lot of revenue, then they're good candidates to be eliminated or reduced.
Could it be possible that this relates to the emotional functional division as well, where you judge your options on which direction you want to take? If you're very functional, you may want to extend or enhance your emotional offering, and vice versa.
Yes, it can be seen in that way also.
Not exclusively, but as one lane.
Mm-hmm.
I like the relative simplicity of this model and because all the, like as example, going back to the steps, that was pretty complex, but this one distills down to the EERC, eliminate, reduce, raise, create. And if say you want to do a case study, I want to look at why something is doing well, I can point back to say, okay, what they reduce, what they eliminate, what did they create? So I think this is I like this model quite a bit. It's simple, it gets to the point, and it's great for case studies.
Exactly, and it's also great when you are testing how you can tweak your value curve in order to get something that diverges from the other. Then you can experiment, like if we reduce here, create this or eliminate. So it's, I agree with you, Leo, it's a really very simple and efficient framework, model to apply.
We're starting to answer my question actually, so it might be good.
The one last thing I just realized why I like this so much is because it can get buy-in very quickly from people that don't understand more complex concepts where this stuff comes from. Like at the base, this is pretty understandable. If you want to, talk to your uppers, get the bigger, more influential people in on it, they can understand this. But behind it, is the 6 steps and all the other complex stuff. Presenting in this manner, they'll get behind it. So I think that's why I figured I just liked it. It's simple enough to where everyone can understand it and you can get buy-in with it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yes, I completely agree. When I start presenting Blue Ocean strategy to someone who doesn't know, I start from strategy canvas and this eliminate, reduce, raise, create. It's a really very good start and simple way to explain.
I guess what's quite good about this in terms of getting the buy-in for those senior people as well is that when you're talking about raising and reducing, you're talking about things that are probably quite familiar to them, that are sort of the industry norms, and you're just tweaking them. So that they're not necessarily about red ocean, you're still swimming in the red ocean using these, because you're dialing them up and down to suit your needs. But if you talk to people about what you're going to raise and reduce, you're going to be saying, you're going to tweak these things that you already do and you already know about, but it's the eliminating and the creating stuff that where we're going to start innovating, and that's where the extra value is going to come from. So you're not just saying, right, just chuck everything out the window and start from scratch with all these great new ideas. It's like, we've got a familiar base here, but we're going to try and push the envelope a bit as well. So maybe that, eases the pain of them making these decisions as well.
Right. I think this ties heavily into the 3 tiers of non-customers, which when I reread it, decades later in Blue Ocean Shift, I was like, oh wow, they're basically talking about jobs theory, which looks at non-customers and kind of riffing on that and putting it in a new context. And then I went, because I'm an author and I'm always curious, like, what did they do from book 1 to book 2? And I go back and realize that 2.5 decades ago they actually were talking about non-customers, the 3 tiers, and this eliminate, raise, reduce, create was absolutely foundational to doing the strategy canvas. And I feel like with this book, they're now at a high level, like taking what they did in the early days of coming up with these different ways to look at different models for looking at how you could shift your business, and putting them in a new context so that they're prescriptive. And so I'm starting to kind of, I feel like, get their tools a little bit more, or a lot more, and that this one is core to getting non-customers. Particularly, like, I love that example from chapter 9 about the state university. where you're looking for, they're looking, instead of improving it for this university or for this college, like comparing it to the other direct competitors of, oh, we need to be better because have better food. That's what the complaints of the current customers are. Our food isn't good. The dorms aren't as good. The professors aren't as good. But instead looking at, well, what about all the people that don't even bother applying to this college because they think they either can't afford it or it won't advance them, and really focusing on them I feel like really targeting the non-customers, even the 2 and 3 tiers, and using this as a guide, you can completely reinvent your business model.
Yeah, it makes it seem a lot less mysterious. Like when I read the first book and saw the examples of like Cirque du Soleil, I'm thinking, wow, that's brilliant. Like, how did anyone ever come up with the idea to do that? Like, you can understand in retrospect what they did and how brilliant it was. But getting there is what they've made much easier in this book.
Yeah. We now have that's the big change in the 2 books. One was case studies, kind of proving the theory, teaching us what blue ocean strategy is, that it's, taking Porter's differentiation, low cost, and creating this concept of value innovation now, but yet not explaining, well, it's one thing to look back, but how do we go forward and do this with our own company? And now they're really trying to make it like, here is our how-to guide toward doing this, a process.
I still feel like, and that's my question, everything is really well structured until this point. So you really have all the building blocks in place, but then the question or the idea of come up with the blue ocean alternatives, and actually some of the things that you guys have mentioned help to make sense, because it really requires to create some sort of a funnel where you define the width or the depth of how far you want to go from your current value and make it into a value innovation. And in a way, again, for me, coming from a very creative background, it seems like we're sort of falling back to the brainstorming model, but it's probably not the best way to do it. We want to be more structured like everything else thus far. And that's my question. How do you do it using all these tools, all these building blocks, and define where do you want to go to? And still, again, the Cirque du Soleil example seems like you do need to be creative at some point. And potentially this is the point where it comes to being creative and not completely methodical.
That's a good point. I mean, I don't know if they went out and talked to circus goers and theater goers. They probably didn't.
Everything's possible, and we discussed how resource intensive this could be, but I can share from my experience as of recent, I've done a lot of user testing with actual target audience that wasn't very easy to reach out to, and many people, perhaps they're more observant or intelligent, actually came up with ideas. They didn't phrase them as such, but if we were listening closely enough, we could hear bits and pieces that we could compile into an understanding of, wow, we could really rethink this in a different mental model. Again, speaking in UX terms. So if you expand this to business terms, this might be a good method if you are a good listener.
I think we have one more question, which is Mina's question.
Yes, exactly. It's a very simple question. I just wanted to get some more inspiration when I read that part 2 to take a look at the different strategic groups, and the examples that they had. It was much more like low cost, high cost, like luxury hotel, cheap hotels. Do you have any other examples about different strategic groups? I don't know too much about strategic work, but is it always just like luxury versus cheap? Is it always cost, or it can be some other types of different strategic groups?
I'll say that when I was reading this part, Path 1 and Path 2, my immediate thoughts were everything is being said right now kind of revolves around time and money. And then it's the creative ways to either reduce costs or, reduce time for the users, which again, it all falls for me. It all falls into the overall experience. But yeah, so when I was reading that, I also read a lot about time and money, and I think the creativity part is like what they were doing was finding really unique, let's say, blue ocean ways to either have stuff cost less or give their users more free time, because time is becoming more and more valuable the busier we get. But that was my take on that part. So.
Anybody else on strategic groups?
David's loudly
Right,
top.
well,
David's loudly typing. Here it comes. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I should mute my mic.
We got like a PC type keypad.
I think in the middle of the book they do focus too much on time and money, and instead of focusing on how Apple has managed to get past this, because Apple has something in addition to time and money. Everybody knows they're paying too much, but people are still buying Apple products.
Yeah.
And people who want to buy alternatives are not buying Android phones and Microsoft computers or Linux computers. So the people who told me they want to get away from Apple have nowhere to go. That's an interesting fact. So there's something about the fact that Apple does, in the end, produce the best solution in many ways.
mhm.
I mean, they focus
Is
on
this just a feeling or an impression that there's nowhere to go? I'm locked in the same Mac user place, and I feel the same. And every time I'm about to buy a new computer as a user, thinking of the alternative, and I end up just batting my head against the Apple wall with whatever restrictions they enjoy putting on me.
So I think for the record, I'm going to say something positive about Microsoft for the first time in 20 years. I'm going to buy a Microsoft laptop and not a Linux laptop, because I know that a Linux laptop would be too much work for me over the years, and I can always do something Linux-y inside a Microsoft laptop. So that'll be my next purchase sometime between now and a few months from now.
Are you going to save money buying this?
I'll get everything better, including less of an ecosystem, less of a closed wall, closed garden ecosystem. Because over the last 10 years, Apple has become very closed garden.
Right.
So there's a strategic factor other than time and cost.
Yes.
Open source, openness of the ecosystem.
And then
Yeah.
another thing Apple does really well is community. They have everything plays well together, all the devices. They have a fervent fan base, and they did a really good job of building the Apple brand and Apple community. So I think they did an amazing job.
They also latch onto specific software products that are only available for Mac users, and once you are inside this ecosystem, it used to be for creative people, but it expands a little further. You're kind of locked into it if you use Sketch or Logic.
Sketch.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, for me, I look at it, as someone who's used Mac since I was 28, no, I think I was 18, 19 in college, so over 30 years. And I see my son using, he has a Mac and he has a PC, and he had an iPhone, he has an Android, and he uses them for different things, but he definitely loves the Apple products because, they're blingier at his middle school. They're fashion. People who are the kids that have the 10s. He's like, I can't believe that kid is a 10. I should have a 10. And, but at the same time, he's kind of platform agnostic because he's like, well, I want the PC because it's better for gaming. And so it'll be interesting to see. I believe that when they put out products like the iPod, and particularly because it was the first affordable product that non-creatives, like professionals like us, would buy. They would just buy this $40 thing to listen to music. And then all of a sudden they were, as mentioned before, becoming addicted to their ecosystem of such an easy way to access music, such an easy way to navigate music. And well, I better get in a Mac now because it's easier to get everything into iTunes. And then pretty soon you're fully addicted to, to that system. I think it's quite genius.
Ecosystems are powerful.
Yeah.
So now that we got kind of to the end of the questions, how do people feel about trying to do the non-customers exercise?
But Melanie, there are 2 more questions on the next page.
Oh,
Really?
Oh, maybe people added questions.
Yeah,
Sorry,
they
I
must
printed
have.
it out because I knew it would be tricky to look at.
I'm out of time, unfortunately. I could only make an hour.
Yeah, I gotta take off in a bit too.
Well, thanks.
If
Well,
you guys
Maybe we should
continue,
cover the last couple of questions, and then.
Well, it's AL's question.
it's fairly covered already, but if anyone else, we opened it up and I got a few good thoughts from you guys almost intuitively when you started talking about it. But I'm mainly curious about how creative and brainstormy this would be and how much more structured we can be about it, and how to define, I mentioned this bandwidth or width of how far and how deep we want to go. How can we define this in advance so that we don't get too strayed or distant from our core offering? It looks like essentially we want to still offer the same offerings here, so let's still provide the performance. They didn't create a flagship store, for example. So you define how far you want to go, but still within making a French fries machine.
Yep.
Right, I think the structure provides maybe the creative juice for the brainstorming because it forces you to come up with ideas that are in totally different spaces or adjacent spaces that you might not think of if you were just relying on your own native creativity. And that's what I like about the 6 paths, is because it forces you to look in these different areas. It stimulates those creative brainstorming ideas in a somewhat organized way.
Right.
One thing I was thinking about, I'm not sure if this was covered in the book, I can't remember, but once you've gone through this systemized way of looking through these different lenses, what do you then do in terms of picking what you want to do next? Which approach you're going to go for? Because the hotel example was looking at, I think, the path 2 options. But let's say, for example, I guess you'd expect maybe 1 or 2 or 3 paths to sort of naturally come to the fore with, more potential than, say, the others. But let's say you've got 2 competing sort of opportunities that come from analysing 2 different paths. I can't remember if there's any process for them deciding which of the 2 you try to go for, or do you try and do both? And can you do both? Are they actually conflicting in any way? I wasn't sure if there was any information about that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I realised I just chucked an extra question through, so sorry about that.
Does anybody know the answer to that? So the output, the ERCC framework, it's a 1 per path output, I guess.
Yeah, that's
Actually, I think it brings in multiple themes, though. I think maybe that's it.
Yeah,
So-
I could see you could certainly use it like that. I was just wondering if there was any kind of so if you can do them, then maybe there is no conflict. I suppose, and if there is conflict, maybe then that's just I guess not. There probably are going to be many decisions where it's totally 50-50, and then if it is just toss a coin, I suppose. I guess maybe if you start thinking about other ways of working, like maybe taking borrowing some lean principles and just quickly putting some assumptions and hypotheses together and just going and testing them. Creating one ERRC grid isn't sort of that doesn't have to be like a set in stone template. You can still go and test that to see if it's a workable
I think that
idea.
might be the next chapter.
Is it? Oh, okay.
I think. I peeked at the first page of the next chapter. Could be that. What was the last question? That's David again.
Maybe we can talk about it next time. It's more of an overview of what I've seen so far in all the chapters. They're distributing pain or struggle across several stages, and I've listed them out here. Because the people who are not used to any form of design or of this type, they're going to feel pain at different stages, or discomfort or struggle. But we could save that for next time.
Yeah, next week I definitely think we should do a retrospective, do the last chapters, but also look back at like the whole entire book.
And if we can come back to Eyal's question next week, we'll have more, because I want to analyze this question more.
Well, we can think about it instead of having to answer it on the fly. So then, do you guys want to wrap up then, since we're close, a little bit over an hour?
Yes, I definitely hop off.
Okay.
Yes, I also have to leave. I also allocate. But see you next week. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye,
All
guys.
right.
Bye.
Bye.
This is good. A lot of questions covered very fast.
Yeah, this is a great format. I think that moving forward, we did cover a lot in the time frames, so I like this format quite a bit too.
Yeah, and everybody brings really different questions to the table. So, all right, so we're all going to read chapter 5 or step 5, not chapter 5. Step 5, and Jamie will lead us next time, our fearless leader.
Okay, well,
This is great. Thank you, Jamie, for organizing us all.
thank you, Melanie, for hosting this, and thank you,
Melanie.
Pete, again for the last one. The videos are live on YouTube, and now people can learn how to do a buyer utility map from our attempt at it. And thank you, Leo and David and Mina and everybody for joining. And we'll see each other next week.
All right, talk to you all later.
Take care, guys. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.